Welcome everyone to our weekly live Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free, throw them in the chat. I'll answer them as I see them come up. If you're watching on the replay here on Facebook or catching us on our YouTube channel, still throw your questions in the comments. We'll bring those up in the following week's live Q&A from there. Speaking of which, we did have a question from our YouTube. Question was talking and asking about ideal recovery time for your exercises. Specifically, they had questions about body weight exercises and major muscle groups. So I want to kind of get into that. We've got like general, but then there's some caveats and things to be taken into consideration because everyone's a little different, situation's different, goals are different, abilities are different. So there's always different aspects there that can impact and apply for us. So generally, the recovery is around 48 hours is what we're looking for. Give or take, everyone's going to be a little bit different. There's things that kind of impact that we'll kind of get into as we go along here with it. The challenge is for a lot of people, for what their goals are, they're either not doing enough or they're doing way too much too fast and impairing recovery. And those are what impact being able to see progress, especially in aspects of strength and performance or even muscle building. For fat loss, like you might have a slight impairment, but really for fat loss, just doing the work, as long as your calories are controlled, you're going to see some changes there. Where this stuff really impacts is on being able to build more muscle mass, being able to increase strength, performance, and athleticism is what this really gets into the most. What people don't really realize is that the workout isn't where you're getting stronger. It's the stimulus to make your body go through the recovery cycles and phases. That's where the strength and ability really improves. So the workout's just the stimulus. We have to give it the right stimulus, and then the rest and recovery is where the repair, rebuilding, and improvement really comes into play for getting muscles bigger or being able to perform better and handle more from a strength and performance standpoint as well. And then there's different components both in the training that we do as well as in the recovery focus as far as dependent upon what are our goals. From trying to maximize muscle volume, or is it just maximizing strength and performance, strength and stamina, power output, things of that nature. When we recover, we're repairing muscle, it's increasing strength and tensile load. Your energy systems, both in the full body as well as each muscle cell itself, is improving and adapting. You can't do that during the work. It has to happen when we're at rest. So if you never recover enough, that's when we start to see a lot of either lack of improvement or even a decline in improvement, depending upon how severe and minimal our recovery time is. So we got to look at a couple things that kind of impact the recovery needs and start with that first. So recovery is not a one-size-fits-all because a lot of it is going to depend upon the workout itself, your individual abilities in reference to that workout, and what are your training goals. So big things that we look at, your training intensity. That's going to be like how demanding and how difficult the workout is itself. Typically, the more intense, the more time we need to recover afterwards. Overall training volume. So this is similar to intensity, but it's a little bit different. So you can have a high volume, but the intensity isn't really that big because you're taking longer rest breaks in between. You're doing a lot of repetitions and a lot of working sets, but you're recovering in between each set itself because you're trying to optimize performance for each of those individual sets. So your volume may be high, but the intensity isn't there. So that's why it's two different variables, not just one. Your individual fitness level, the more adapted you are, typically the easier it is to recover The caveat to that is the better fitness level, the harder you're capable of pushing yourself. So sometimes you're going to need more recovery in that respect. Sleep quality is a big one. Sleep is when your body does the most cellular repair and regeneration. So if your sleep is impaired, either in the duration or quality of sleep, meaning getting good quality REM cycles going on an extended period of basis, that's where that regeneration really occurs. And then nutrition is another big aspect that we'll get into as well. Stress can play a factor. When we're talking about recovery and fatigue, systemic fatigue is always a factor, and the challenge is stress impacts that fatigue, that systemic fatigue, on top of whatever your training stimulus is as well. So always something to kind of keep in mind, that if you've got a real high stress job or demands at home or school, we may need to make adjustments to the workload of our workout so we're not overly impairing your body's ability to recover by adding too much stress to the system in regards to what else is going on outside the gym. Age is a big one. Oftentimes, the older we are, we need a little bit more time to recover because we have less effective circulation. Our hormone levels that affect recovery are typically lower. We've already got some injuries that we're trying to work around and through, so things of that nature. And again, previous injuries are another factor for recovery as well to keep in mind. So it's always important to kind of keep these things in mind. A workout where you're doing just moving your body, we're not really hitting major failure. We're getting plenty of rest periods rather than just going back to back to back. All those things kind of matter as far as how difficult it is and what recovery we need afterwards. So general, again, around 48 hours is kind of that accepted recovery phase before you train the same muscle group again. Ways kind of around that are you can do the same muscle groups, but maybe you're doing different types of exercises, so it's not the exact same targeting mechanism and method, so that can be a slightly different thing. A different training modality or phase is another thing to look at. So maybe you trained heavy weight, low reps on day one. Day two, you're doing light weight, high repetitions. So slightly different systems, slightly different modalities. And then again, you can do completely different exercises. So it's not the exact same movement pathway that we're hitting, is another way to change that aspect up a little bit too. 48 hours is generally accepted. Depending on your ability to recover, sometimes you can do less than that. Depending on the intensity and your ability to recover, sometimes you're going to need more than that. So again, if the workout's moderate, you didn't train to exhaustion, your recovery is usually going to be faster. Whereas if there was a lot of volume, you're doing a lot of sets to failure, or sets that have no rest in between, you're going to probably need a longer break recovery phase with that, just because everything's put on demand there. And the key thing to remember in a lot of these workouts, it's not just the muscle tissue that needs the rest, your nervous system needs the rest too. Because when things are very high demand, either with new movements or we're taking the body to complete failure, that's taxing your nervous system as well as the muscle system. So we need a little bit more recovery in that respect. Otherwise, we end up overstressing and taxing that system on top of it. And the problem is your nervous system is used in day-to-day life, so other stresses play into that as well. Soreness and recovery, a lot of people kind of confuse the two. Soreness doesn't always mean that it was a great workout, that you're going to get better progress. It's a decent indicator, but it's not the end-all be-all. And a lack of soreness doesn't mean that you didn't work out enough per se. It also doesn't necessarily mean that you're ready to go for the workout either. What we're really looking for in terms of recovery is, can you do whatever exercise you did previously at the same level or better than the last time we trained? So if, let's say, if you were doing your body weight stuff, so if you did a push-up workout on Monday, if by Wednesday you're trying to do that push-up workout again and you can't do at least the same or more for that workout, we didn't recover enough. And now we're overstressing and overtaxing those systems, and it's going to detrimentally affect our performance improvement. Being able to move normally and properly is another big aspect with that. If you did your workout, you're going into the next workout for the same muscle groups, but you're not quite able to move right because either you're trying to avoid a soreness issue, or maybe one of your joints is feeling a little tender and hot, so you're trying to find a way to move that doesn't agitate it. Like, we're not ready yet. You need more rest before we train that muscle again. You're able to give maximal efforts again, rather than, like, if you're going into your warm-up set and already feeling like you're taxed and spent, we're not recovered enough. And just your overall energy is another factor too. If you don't feel like you can put the oomph into your workout, we're probably not recovered enough to train that muscle group, or any muscle group, and that, for that matter, if we're really feeling that taxed. Sometimes beginners need a little more recovery, because your body is less adapted. So with less coordination of movement, we're really taxing your nervous system, because part of for a true beginner novice, part of your initial training phase is the learning how to move. So the more muscles are being recruited than what someone who's optimized for that movement is. And the body's using more nervous system response to get feedback on which contractions are helping, which contractions aren't, so it can narrow the coordination of what it needs to activate and what it doesn't need to activate. That requires more recovery, more adaptation time, so it can work at top effectiveness the next session around. If your recovery systems aren't recovered, you're going to be less efficient in it, and we're going to suffer in the next following workout with it. So don't feel that you have to start, every day of the week with your workout. It's okay starting with 2 or 3 days a week as a novice. You're going to get ample stimulus and still see good results without overtaxing your body. The key thing is to remember that if you're running into the issue where you need more recovery time, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're weak or you're failing. Doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong, but we'll get into some of the other aspects of adaptation and recovery that you want to make sure you're aware of. If you're taking care of all of those and we're still running into this, it would not hurt to consult with your doctor, do some more blood work and things and aspects of hormone panels, recovery things, to make sure that everything's working properly in the body for that phase of recovery. Key thing to understand, recovery doesn't necessarily mean do nothing. We still want to do our daily movement, whether walking, mobility work, stretching. Obviously, keep your hydration up, sleep. We still want to move. It doesn't mean just veg out forever. It just means that we're not heavily taxing the body in a demanding way, so the systems that were overloaded the last time can actually recover. So just kind of keep that in mind. Some people could hear recovery and rest in between workouts and think that means I don't have to do anything at all, and that's not the case. Especially if weight loss is your goal. We still want you moving something every single day. So nutrition and aspect of recovery. This is where protein really matters the most, because protein is what's going to be primarily needed and used for muscle repair and building in that recovery phase. So if your protein intake isn't adequate, that's when we see oftentimes that soreness extend beyond that 48-hour time, and sometimes it continues getting worse past that 48-hour point if our protein is not at optimum level for our needs. So typical guidelines for people trying to either build muscle or majorly lose fat with a workout plan, you're looking your protein intake around 1 gram per body weight. It is a pretty safe bet that you're going to get enough to meet all of your protein needs without getting into danger levels. Aiming below that, you're going to get the protein that you need. It's just if you have an off day, we're going to potentially have days where we're not getting enough. So that's kind of where that recommendation comes from a little bit. I know it's above kind of the RDA, but RDA doesn't take into account if we are doing major training or major weight loss in our pursuit, and the protein demands become higher when we are doing things of that nature. Your hydration needs to be up. Your muscle tissue is 70% water. So if you're chronically dehydrated, it's going to struggle more to make sure that those cells are replenished and to build new cells as well. So making sure you get enough hydration is a big factor. Calorie total intake is a big factor here too, because if you're in a caloric deficit, that adds to our systemic fatigue. So you have local fatigue, which is the fatigue of the muscle itself. Systemic fatigue is fatigue in your whole body. If you're chronically eating lower than what you need to maintain your weight because you're trying to lose weight, that's going to impact our ability to recover, especially if we're excessively low in that calorie intake on a day-to-day basis. So that's the reason why for our clients, we try and keep around a 250, no more than 500 calorie deficit from our nutritional intake, because we don't want to get so low that we're impacting the recovery ability of the body and diminishing performance, because that's going to diminish our ability to expend energy and burn fat that way too. So just keep that in mind there. Sleep is the other big factor we covered on this. If your sleep is deficient or low quality, recovery slows down, your energy in the day is worse, your soreness typically will last longer, your performance itself will decline. And the other challenge and aspects of weight management, if our sleep is impacted, our nutrition typically becomes worse because it impacts our ability to make better decisions and choices. So we impact recovery that way because we're not nourishing our body effectively as we could if we were properly rested. So keep sleep as a focus too, because you can't repair and recover if you're not getting effective sleep. Frequency for training, again, for most adults, 2 to 3 times a week with a full body workout is more than sufficient enough to build your muscle, improve your fitness, get stronger, make your metabolic health better. And when you combine it with your daily movement and proper nutrition, weight management becomes a huge benefit with that as well. So you don't need 6 to 7 intense days of workouts. You don't need to be constantly sore. You just need something that you can stay consistent with. And that's a big thing, because if you're training so intensely that we start dealing with fatigue issues, that's a problem, because the likelihood of us falling off becomes much greater at that point, and that's going to impact our overall pursuit of health and well-being and proper weight management. So signs to be aware of for not recovering well. First and foremost is constant fatigue. If you're hitting a point where you're just constantly dragging your feet through your day, in the gym, at home, like that's an issue. We're either overtraining, we're undersleeping, or we're improperly nourishing, or a combination of those three. So we need to nip that in the bud, because that's going to start negatively impacting other components of our life in a very detrimental way. So be aware of that. It's not a feature, that's a bug of any wellness pursuit. If you start noticing major fatigue all the time, we need to make adjustments either in your caloric intake, your nutrient intake, your sleep, or the level and amount of work that you're doing. Declining performance is another one. So again, if you've done a workout, the next time you go to do the same workout, if you can't train at the same level or better, that's a decline in performance. That means we've got an issue with recovery. And we need to be aware of that, because if it happens more than once, that's a major issue. If it happens time to time, sometimes that's just, we're fighting a bug. Kids didn't let you sleep enough. Like, you can usually identify why you're not performing as well. But if you're noticing over and over again, your performance is declining and you can't pinpoint a specific reason why in your week that you would be in that decline, then we've got an issue with recovery that we need to address. Either the duration of time in between our workouts, the sleep, the nutrition, one of those things that we got to look at. Another aspect of if we're overtraining, it can start impacting our sleep, because overtraining is a form of stress. And sometimes when we get stressed out, it impacts our ability to sleep because our cortisol levels are too high. So just be aware of that, that if you are excessively overtraining, it can impact that as well. Lingering soreness is a big thing. Like we've talked about, after about 48 hours, the soreness should be starting to decline in intensity, not staying the same or getting worse at that point. If your soreness is going beyond the 48-hour mark, either staying the same or getting worse, that's an issue of either overtraining, undernourishing, or undersleeping, and sometimes hydration. So we want to make sure that we're addressing those things. If the soreness is still progressing, we need to look at your physiology as well. So from a personal experience, that was one of the kind of big awareness things that I had a problem going when I was trying to do recovery for my back. I would do a beginner's workout, like if I was my own client, on what to do to help start building up my strength and abilities to get better, but I'd be wrecked for a whole week after that. And lo and find out, like, I had hormone issues that were affecting my body's ability to recover and repair itself, which is part of what caused the back issues in the first place. So that's something to be aware of, that if you're not repairing and recovering in an efficient manner, but you're doing all the nutrition, the sleep, and everything else properly, meet with your doctor, get your blood checked, make sure everything's on point with that. Joint aches. So a component of overtraining or under resting, little kind of two different things, some overlap. That may be a subject for a different time. But if, let's say, you've got a shoulder that aches after a chest workout and it's not recovered by the next time you're doing a chest workout, that's an issue with our training or our recovery, because it's not able to rest enough to get up there. Every once in a while, when we train hard and heavy, things are going to get a little traumatized and there's going to be a little irritation, but it should get better within that 24, 48 hour range. It should not still be a problem the next time you train. If it is, that's an issue. We need to look at your training, your movement patterns, and then if it's still persisting, we definitely need to have the doctor check it out and make sure there isn't an underlying injury that we're unaware of. Lack of motivation. This kind of goes with that fatigue and declining in performance. If we're just kind of dragging our butt into the gym over and over all of a sudden, there's an issue with our recovery. Either we're not resting effectively through either sleep or time in between workouts, our calories are too low and we're not nourishing properly. Like, that's a big sign that something's going on with our recovery and rest aspects in our nutrition that is impairing our overall abilities. So be mindful of that. Kind of hand in hand with that is elevated cravings. If all of a sudden you go from being able to keep your appetite in check to constantly like looking for more, that's a sign that we're kind of overtraining, because we're pushing the body so hard that its demand for new nourishment is more than what our typical willpower can withstand. So be mindful of that. So it's important to understand more is not always better. Sometimes more is just more, and it can actually have detrimental effects rather than beneficial effects. So good recovery is more important than more workouts in the grand scheme of things, because the idea is to keep this consistent. So remember, the goal is not to destroy yourself every workout. It's to challenge yourself on a consistent enough basis that we get adaptations that bring improvement in our body, not degradation and declining in performance ability and motivation and energy. So we should be getting better, not worse, with our workouts. If we notice that issue, we need to make adjustments with things. So the goal is being able to be sustainable, not have random, like, go hard, get burnt out, fall off, and then wait for the motivation to light up again. We want to be able to keep this on a steady, consistent stream of work and effort for us that still brings about steady improvement in our performance and our physique and physiology. So remember, typically around 48-hour window is there. Some of that's going to depend upon the intensity of your workout, your sleep, stress, your nutrition levels, and your relative fitness level. And remember, recovery is part of the program. It's not a separate component. They go hand in hand. They need to be thought about together. You don't need extreme workouts to see progress. You need consistency that you can do on a regular basis and see improvement is the key thing. So if we do too little, we're not going to see improvement. If we do too much, we're going to have a decline in performance and ability. If you're unsure of really what you should be doing, how often, or how to make changes to your program so you're not dealing with these things, feel free to reach out. Happy to have a call, go over things with you and see what's going on and what needs to be adjusted to make it better for you. Otherwise, in the meantime, stay consistent and persistent in your consistent pursuit of health.